Hi, this is Josh Kulp. We are learning Daf Shevui, Masechet Avodah Zarah, Daf Nun Aleph, page 51. It's a long daf, so I will try to be quick, summarizing what's coming up. And as always, if you have questions later on, you can ask on our Daf Shevui Facebook page. So the first topic we discussed is an idol worshipped in a strange manner, or in a manner that doesn't seem to be like the normal way of worshiping something. That's by throwing sticks at it, or perhaps by breaking a stick. Somehow this is like the stick idol, right? Whereas the Mercurius that we had before was an idol worshipped by having stones put near it, thrown at it. This idol is worshipped with sticks. And there's an interesting rule that comes up that we've sort of seen throughout, and that is for an act of idolatry to be considered forbidden, strictly speaking, as an act of idolatry, it must be similar to an act performed in the temple. So the rabbis say something like breaking a stick is a little bit like slaughtering. So we can understand why somebody is breaking a stick is liable for idolatry. But throwing a stick should also make one liable, and the statement seemed to say it didn't, because throwing a stick is a little bit like sprinkling blood. What I think is important in this conversation is this notion that for something to be idolatrous, it has to be a recognizable form of worship. And how do we understand what worship means? We understand what worship means through the lens of our own religion, our own tradition, and that's how things were done in the temple. And you're going to see this kind of analogy, this kind of thought process working throughout this parak. That then becomes compared to the issue of the worshiping of the Mercurius, and they ask questions such as, well, how is throwing a stone at Mercurius considered to be idolatry? Is that, or is that not, similar to something that we, the Jews, would do at their own temple? Then there's a discussion of sacrificing a blemished animal, which again, to a certain extent, touches on that subject. We Jews don't offer blemished animals on our altar. So what if a non-Jew or a Jew offers for idolatry a blemished animal? Since that's not similar to our form of worship, should he be exempt? And that indeed is what the Talmud says. We then move into a theoretical discussion that is going to be brought up again later on. We're going to have a whole bunch of theoretical discussions. What about slaughtering an animal to Mercurius? Again, people don't seem to have done that. People seem to have worshipped Mercurius in a different way. So here you have, what if you take an idol that's worshipped in an unusual way, and then worship it in a way that's a usual way, but not usual for that idol. So that sort of means is usual defined by how that idol is worshipped? Or is usual defined by how any idol is worshipped, or how our religious practice in the Beit HaMikdash would have occurred? And then this becomes tied into, I told you this was a complicated page, tied into an issue that I want to just make sure you're familiar with, and you can go back over this later on, is the notion of times in which Israelites were or were not allowed to offer on private altars, bamot. When the Mishkan settled in Shiloh, after the Israelites had entered the land of Israel, it became prohibited to offer in private bamot, private altars. But when that Mishkan was destroyed, it became again permitted to offer in private altars. This is sort of all in sort of like rabbinic ideology of the First Temple period. So there was a time, let's say before the Mishkan was put into Shiloh, where Israelites could offer at any private altar. And there was a time after where Israelites could again offer in private altars, but there was also a notion that once the Beit HaMikdash was built, you could not offer any more sacrifices anywhere besides the Beit HaMikdash inside the temple. So you'll see this when it comes up. It becomes tied into a longer discussion there. It's a little bit complicated, admittedly. There's another two Mishnayot that end this chapter. One is about not the end of this chapter, end this daf, and this page, One is about things that are found near the idol. If they're considered offerings, then they're prohibited. If they're considered decorative to the idol, then they're prohibited. But just because things are found near the idol doesn't mean they're part of idolatry, and therefore the rabbis have to discuss what things found near an idol a Jew can take. Always returning to that discussion of what use can we make of things that seem to have been involved in idolatrous worship. And this brings us to a final Mishnah on this daf, which talks about an idolatrous shrine that has a garden or a bathhouse. Can a Jew sort of travel around, walk around in the garden? Can he take a bath in the bathhouse? Or are they considered to be idolatrous? The answer is he can, but he can't pay for it. And the Mishnah talks about paying the idolatrous priests for use of such a thing. We don't want to cause benefit to the shrine, even if we're using their things, but their space. But there are exceptions to this, and you'll see the exceptions when you get to the Mishnah. Finally, there's a discussion that will bring us into the next page, so just a little preview of it, and that is a discussion between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva about what makes an idol prohibited. Is it making it? And the second somebody makes an idol, it's prohibited, or is it worshiping it? This has to do with the issue of intent, which is a issue that the rabbis like to talk about all the time. Is the intent on worshiping it enough to already consider it an idol, or does the act of worshiping actually have to be done? And there's differences between Jews who make idols and idolaters who make idols. But that'll come up more on the next page. So I realize this has been a rather long and complicated video, but I hope you enjoy the page and ask me any questions if they come up.